Terrific. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining. Good day. Welcome to another Gimmal Education session today for Gimmal Physical. My name is Marcia Shields, and I'm from our customer success team. Our goal for these sessions are to assist you in addressing your business challenges and demonstrate how your Gimmal software can provide a solution. We aim to enhance your expertise so you can best leverage Gimmal Physical today in particular. We are recording the session and will be shared this after the event. You can also go out to our Gimmal YouTube channel for any of the recordings if you happen to miss a session in the past. We're going to start today with a quick poll. I'm going to launch that right now. We'd really love your input on what you'd like to see in future education sessions. Certainly we want to give you what you want for better experience to learn about Gimmal Physical. We're planning out for Q3 and Q4. It might seem early, but we do like to get these scheduled. So if you have any thoughts on what you'd like to see in future sessions, this would be a good time to do that. We'll keep that poll up. Okay. Tim Butler is with me today. Tim is going to be your subject matter expert. And today, Tim's going to be talking about various types of lists within Gimmal Physical, their uses, and how to manage them. Format is the same. We're going to go for about 15 to 20 minutes for product demonstration, and then we'll follow that up with 10 minutes for your questions. If you do have questions during the demonstration, please feel free to post them in the Q&A section on the bottom or top of your Zoom bar, and we'll be happy to answer those after. Tim, I think that's all I have, so I'm going to pass things over to you.
All right. Thanks, Marcia. Appreciate it. And yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys taking a few minutes out of your day to spend with us. Hopefully it's helpful to you. I believe on the whole, this will be a refresher for most of you, but who knows, you might learn a thing or two that you didn't know previously. As Marcia has already indicated, there will be a time for questions at the end, or you can certainly hit us up offline as well with any questions that come to mind after the fact. All right, so with that, let's talk about list values within the Gimmal Physical application. Guys, I'm going to speak technical for just a second here. Please don't worry, I won't be technical beyond this. In the end, a list in Gimmal Physical is a reflection of data in a table. Tables in Gimmal Physical really is what lies behind all of the various tabs. So if you were to look at our database, you'd find in our database a table dedicated to boxes, one for media, shelves, and so on across the application here. In addition to these sort of record tables or tabs, if you will, in your application under admin, if you scroll down a ways, you're going to find a section called list values. All of the various lists in your application are listed here. So in the end, the lists that we use in Gimmal Physical are a reflection of tables within the database. Now, the question might be a logical question. Well, Tim, why do we even want to use lists in the first place? Why don't we just make everything a text field? And you could, but the basic idea is this. There are some performance technical reasons where lists can be of benefit to you, but really, I think the primary reason for you to use lists, and we encourage you to use lists wherever possible, generally speaking, is it really ensures data consistency, especially in the scenarios where you have multiple people who are entering data in the same areas of the application to make sure they enter it in the same way. That's a really good argument to use a list. Now, how do you manage these lists? Whether these utility lists that you see here, or break out of here for just a moment, or they are lists that are built off of these various tabs. So for example, in my demo application, I've got an organizations tab made up of various organizational records. Well, if you want to add values to the organizational list, and you'll see where this all comes together in just a moment, just like is true with all the tabs, you simply click create, update, or when necessary, delete. So you add, modify, or delete rows of data on this tab, and then the corresponding list that references this tab will automatically and immediately be adjusted. Same thing with the utility lists. If we come back into administration, we click on list values, any of these lists here. So for example, I've got a list called box size in my application. currently only 2 values. If I wanted to add a new list to box size, I would simply put that value there and click on add. If I wanted to modify, I would simply select one of these guys and change the modified value. Or if you wanted to remove it, again, highlight it and then remove the value. So whether you're talking about these utility lists, which you can view, you can create, you can update and delete, or you're talking about the tabs in the application, like the organizations tab, same basic practices there. You can view, you can create, you can update, you can delete, just done in a slightly different way. Now, with that quick background as to what a list is and why you would use it in the first place, and then how you go about managing the values in the list, let's briefly cover, guys, how we render these lists in the Gimmal Physical application. I'm going to use my boxes tab here, but it could be any of the tabs. And of course, your application will vary slightly depending upon how it was designed for you. But let's jump to the create a box page or view in the application and highlight some of these lists. At the top, what we call this type of control, it is a list, right? We call it a large list because it's pointing back to a tab. In fact, anytime you see a list rendered this way with this larger control and multiple data fields, that's what we refer to as a large list within Gimmal Physical. So organization, record series are 2 examples of large lists because they're pointing to data, a list that's housed on another tab. Whereas if I scroll down just a little bit, whether you're talking about box status, box size, or media type, each one of these is also a list, but it's pointing back to data found under admin and list values. Just different ways to render those lists. Now, there's various flavors of these 2 overall types of lists. Let's start with this simple list right here. And indeed, that's what we call it, is a simple list. This box size list is just a single column of data. In this example, as you saw earlier, I've only got values of 1 or 2, and you can only select one value from this list. This is probably the most intuitive, the most common list that we use in the application, what we refer to as a simple list. Same thing with media type. It's a list of 5 different values. You choose one and only one value from that list, in this example, when you are creating a box. Let's ramp it up just a little bit. I'm going to leave the boxes tab. I'm going to jump over here to the supply item requests tab. Some of you guys have this tab in your application, some do not. But for purposes of illustrating a different flavor of list, if you will, I'm going to show you what we have here. Guys, this is an example of parent-child lists. So the item drop-down is a list, as is quantity. It is a list, but we've created a relationship between these of parent-child. You'll notice if I'm creating a new supply item request and I try to choose from the quantity, there's no values to select from because it is a child dependent upon the selected parent. So in this example, I first got to choose a value from the parent list. So for example, I'll say, hey, I'm requesting boxes. When I've identified the type of item, the values in my child list, in this case, quantity, now appear. So boxes have values of 12, 24, 36, and 48. Whereas if we're talking about folders, because it's a child list, now there are different values from which I can select. So simple list, and then here we have parent-child list as an example, just a different flavor. Option 3 or flavor 3, if you will, relatively new in terms of our offerings. So within Gimmal Physical, really just started offering this in the core product just a couple of years ago. I'm going to bring you to another tab called the Media tab in my demo application. When you start to enter data on this tab, super simple, right? We're seeing a simple drop, just one field, a simple list. And at first, it behaves just like a simple list in that you choose a single value from it. But what's different about this type of list, which we call a conditional field display list, is once you've selected the value from the list, in this case CD, I then see a field specific to that value in the list. Whereas if I choose, say, microfilm, microfiche, I will see a different set of fields based upon the value that was selected. So this is a conditional field display list. Very quickly, guys, The management of conditional field display is slightly different, a little more complicated. Under admin, rather than going down to the list values, this time you will see this entry here called conditional field display. And if I come to the media tab where I have that conditional field display, what you will see is a control that looks like this. Going across the top of the control are the values in that list. And then down the left-hand side are the additional fields, which you can see you can turn on or off based upon the value in the list. So a quick example there, guys, of a conditional field display list. The next one, guys, most complicated thing you're going to see in our little presentation here today, but also the most, wrong tab. Let me get back over to the boxes tab. The most powerful and very much security minded. And what I'm going to reference now is what we call a secured list. Now, this guy right here in my demo application, this status field on the boxes tab is a secured list. I am logged in as an administrator right now, so I can see all the values in this list. I've only got 5. You could have more than that, certainly, if you wanted to. But here's the idea. Once you have defined this list, just like you would with all of the other lists, you'd come to admin, you'd go to list values, and you'd say, hey, what values do I want to put in that secured list? Let's do that. Let's look at box status. Here are those same 5 values. So you start off the same way as you would with a simple list. But where we really ramp this up now is if you jump back into admin and you look at the security module itself. And I'm logged in as the administrator, guys, so I'm going to quickly first look at him. When I click the link here to modify the security settings for administrators, and then I click on modify list security, on the boxes tab, here is my list called box status. Here are the 5 values in that list, and you'll see just everything has been granted because this is for the administrators. However, just by way of contrast, if I jump here to the general role and do the same thing, click on edit specific to that role and click on that same button, modify list security, notice how this role is set up. So really quickly, guys, that means individuals within the general role, when they go to the boxes tab, and if they have the ability to create boxes, they are only allowed to create boxes of status draft or pending approval. They can't even create boxes with any of these statuses. And to just expand upon that, although we won't have time to get into all the details, hopefully you can see based upon every value in the list, you can then dictate what functions are available based upon those values. So easily the most complex security feature or architectural component that we have in the application is that secured list. One more quick one I want to show you here, guys. Both these large lists as well as these simple lists, these ones here in my first couple examples have been rendered so that you can only make one selection. But we can actually render these lists so you're allowed multiple choices. An example here would be legal holds. It is a large list, but it's rendered slightly differently because you're allowed now to choose multiple values from that list rather than just one. So you can choose as many values as are available there. Same thing with this guy down below. He is a simple list, but you're allowed to select multiple values. And then when you are choosing multiple values from a simple list, there are other columns we can tack onto that selection. Some that would be auto-generated when I click the save button, and then these other ones here where you can just add additional specific notes to that. So those are, guys, the different flavors that are available to you within the application itself. Now, I want to make special note of some particular lists or that drive some additional functionality within the application. So bear with me for 1 second here. We're going to jump now over to the users tab. Most of you, I think, are aware of this. We're going to look at a list on the users tab. So let's bring some users up. I'm going to grab Mr. Super User, who is the one I am logged in as right now. And I want to draw your attention on this tab is a list called organizations. And in fact, if I go to the update page rather than the view page. What this allows you to do is that for every single user of the system, you can select one or multiple organizations. Now, what's special, guys, about this list here? On the one hand, it's a large list. It's a multiple select large list. But in addition to being that, it has the additional functionality that whatever you choose on this page related to this user, in this case, Craig Carpenter, this will now in turn throughout the rest of the application limit Craig to only items corresponding to the organizations selected in this control. To say it a different way, if Craig were to go to the boxes tab and try to create a box, he would only be allowed to choose from these two organizations that have been selected. For those of you in the know, there is kind of a big caveat to that, and it is that security exclude. If you want to just take a shortcut and say no, regardless of what is selected here for Craig, if you check that box, that has the same effect as if you would just select all here and grant him access to every single organization. I want to call out, guys, a couple of other kind of anomalies to the basic architectural capability we have with lists. I'm going to bring you back to the list values page itself. There are some specialized lists, guys, that would be true for all of you. The details will vary slightly depending upon your version of Gimmal Physical, but one of them here is the event code list. It may have been called something slightly different in your application, but these are the triggers or the events that drive disposition. And what we've done with this particular list value, if you will, it is a simple list, but notice for each of the values in this list, you can associate a particular month day, right? Calendar year end, well, it's always 12/31. But if we look at something like fiscal year end, you can then specify whatever the fiscal year end is for you, specific to your organization. So a little just difference there in terms of what you can do with the simple list when it comes to event code. Then there's a couple of other special ones, guys, related to if you are working with an off-site vendor. Won't have time to get into all the details, but appreciate for that box size that we looked at earlier. In addition to whatever size you want to assign in Gimmal Physical, we also need to know what that corresponds to within the off-site vendors database to make sure we get that set up properly. Along these lines, guys, I'll make one more mention here. I won't show this one to you because it doesn't apply to that many people, but I'll make reference here anyway. We also really used to be a custom list, is now part of the core product. We have this ability to create what are known as synonym lists, or some folks call it thesaurus lists, or others even call it chain reference. Here's two quick examples. In the pharmaceutical world, right, a particular drug compound gets known by various trade names or different names in different countries. It's really the same drug, but it's known by different names. So what the synonym list functionality allows you to do is within a list, it enables you to associate multiple values together so that when you search by one value, we can search by all values. Another common example, especially here on the East Coast of the US, in the public sector, a lot of the towns and villages and cities have gone by different names over time. It's the same place, but it's been known by different names across the decades and the centuries. So another use of the synonyms there itself. Want to make one more quick note here, guys, about the data manipulation. And I'm going to just go and keep one eye on the clock, another 90 seconds or so here before we just open it up for questions. Guys, as is true of all of the tabs in Gimmal Physical, you can import data into, you can export data out of it. The same thing is true with these utility lists. If you go back to that page, you could set up what's known as an import profile to populate these list values rather than doing the data entry. And then you can also export the values out of these lists into a CSV format, pretty much the same way as with the data tabs themselves. One more quick just opinion I'm going to inject here, guys. Generally, I discourage you from using multiple select lists. They are there, they're fully functional, but they do complicate the searching, the importing, and the exporting functionality. So just be aware, you can use them, but try to limit the use of those. So especially for those of you that are onboarding right now, going through the implementation process, quick overview as to what the different lists are and what their purposes are in the application. For those of you who have been in the product for quite some time and you're going to upgrade in the near future, something for you to digest to see if you want to change your architecture slightly. You could work, Marcia could put you in touch with our client success to talk through those details. Other than that, let's open the floor for any questions and hopefully some good answers.
Answers will be good. I know that, Tim, for sure. We do have a few questions, but if anybody has any, you can still submit them in the Q&A area, not a problem. Tim, first one, is there a limit to the number of values contained within a list?
Yeah, good question. And the answer is no. You can have as many as you want. However, I'm going to add just a little caveat to that. Both the conditional field display as well as what you saw a little bit earlier, the secured list, although there is no theoretical limit, there is a practical limit. So for example, coming back to the boxes and the status field, if it turned out you had dozens and dozens and even hundreds of statuses, it becomes a little bit of a management headache to manage this control. Now, on the whole, it is a one-time effort to set this up, but generally speaking, when it either comes to conditional field display lists or secured lists, you don't want to use those if you have dozens or hundreds or sometimes even thousands of values. And then one more kind of deal breaker. When it comes to a simple list, and apologies, I am going to speak technical again for just a second here. When you render or when we render a simple list, let me come back to the boxes tab one more time here, back to the create page itself. When we render these lists, if it's a simple list, when I click that list, we actually load up all the values. So if you were to say to me, hey, Tim, I want a simple list, but I want thousands of values in there, we would tell you no, because what would happen, it would work eventually, but you'd click on it and you'd stare at this page for some period of time, waiting for those thousands of values to display. Whereas if it's a large list, we kind of display them one chunk at a time. So if you've got lots and lots and lots of lists, that's almost always going to be a large list rather than a simple list.
Another question, Tim, can I search by multiple list values simultaneously?
You can, guys. Won't have time to show you this in detail, but you can kind of, this crosses over to a different educational session in terms of searching. But guys, if you had, for example, your list value configured here in the quick search, let's say I had box status as one of my quick search fields, I could do things like one, or use that keyword or, two, or three, or. So with the keyword or, yes, you can search by multiple values. Or if you want to be a little more technical, if you use our advanced query, when you come down here, this is, they'll find that box status list. This is a time where you could use this in search operator. And then you can choose multiple values that are available as part of the box status list to search by one or three or five or whatever the example happens to be. So yes, you can search by multiple values.
Okay. And then one more, you talked about parent-child lists earlier. Is there a limit to the number of hierarchical levels within the parent-child list?
No, there's not actually, guys. You can have as many levels as you want. I think the most I've ever seen, I don't have this particular demo set up this way, but you'll often see this on, as an example, the organizations tab. When you're creating new organizations, what I've seen, especially in the public sector, is things like department, division, section, subsection. Now, in my demo, I've made them text fields, and there's a whole nother conversation behind that. There is intelligence when you want to use lists and when you do want to use text fields. But if I had rendered these as drop-down lists, they would have been parent-child. And like I said, I've seen up to 4, but in theory, you can have as many levels as you want nested into that parent, child, grandchild, so on architecture.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tim. That's it on the questions. So thank you for answering all that. Great session today. Thanks for everybody for attending. We hope you enjoyed this, of course. And we'll, as a reminder, we'll be sending the session recording, so be on the lookout for that soon. Another reminder is that we do offer these education sessions twice a month. Next one for Gimmal Physical is for Tuesday, June 11th. Feel free to join any session, even if you're not utilizing that particular product at this time. You can also go to our Gimmal events page for registrations if you happen to miss our emails. But that's it. If you'd like, again, if you have any suggestions for future topics, please feel free to send those to myself or at success@gimmal.com, and we'll get those on the schedule. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.